What's your worst coworker story? Angela, buckle up, this is a ride. I worked in a nursing home back in early 2000s. One day, management walked a woman into our unit and said she was the new hire. A man looked at her and said, "Duck, no. I quit. I will not work with her again. She's crazy. If you seriously just hired her, then I quit." And he gathered his belongings and legit quit on the spot. We should have taken him seriously. I got assigned to train her. She shadowed me for 2 weeks, then was put on another unit. I'd occasionally see her in passing and give her a generic hello, but I had zero interaction with her other than that. I lived in a giant apartment complex. There were 118 different buildings. Each building had 4 to 12 units. One day near the main office, I saw her drive by, and we waved to each other. That is the only time I ever had any form of contact or communication outside of work. That one wave. In the months after she was hired, I heard all kinds of rumors about her. Things like, she claimed every man there was pursuing her, or that she claimed to have hooked up with multiple people, etc. But I know when I trained her, she had said she was married and oddly pulled out a man's driver's license saying it was her husband. Angela was easily 400 libras, with visible sores all over her body and very poor hygiene. The man in the driver's license was absolutely gorgeous. I didn't judge, my boyfriend was significantly better looking than me too. I heard so many rumors about her husband being fake that she stole some good-looking guy's driver's license, but honestly didn't pay attention because I didn't know her or work with her. I keep to myself. I'd go to work and be gone the second I clocked out. I didn't hang out with coworkers and only really kind of knew the people on my unit. There were tons of rumors about Angela. She clearly was not liked at all, but I didn't keep up with it. One day I needed a shift covered. The scheduler had me switch a shift with her. She worked my shift, and another day I worked for her on the unit she usually works. I walked into the break room on that unit, and everyone stopped talking, then they apologized. I asked for what, and they said they were talking crap about Angela, but knew I was really close with her, so they were sorry for talking crap about my friend. I was like, I don't know her. I trained her when she first started, but other than that, I don't know anything about her, other than some of these rumors, like having a fake husband or whatever. And everyone stood silent looking at each other before someone asked, "Wait, you don't know her? You guys aren't friends?" I said no, and they lost their minds. Then they filled me in. Angela had been telling them we were friends. She had a whole make-believe drama-filled friendship with me that she came in and told them about daily. Since I worked on the other unit, none of them knew me well enough to realize it was all lies. She told them that not only had I met her fake husband many times, but I was trying to get them to have a group sex with me. She told them we lived in the same complex and I'd come over to her house so much that I was driving her crazy. She said she'd come home and find me waiting for her on the steps. She complained about how much time and attention I'd suck up. She said I was getting married and she was my maid of honor, that she helped me pick out a wedding dress and everything. She said my fiance and I hung out with her and her husband and tried to get them to swing with us. She said I got left at the altar because my man realized he had feelings for her, and it put her in a really uncomfortable position. She complained about having spent so much money on a maid of honor dress and throwing me a bachelorette party before I got left at the altar. She said I'd call her and stay on the phone until 3 or 4 in the morning, and her husband would cringe whenever the phone rang. He just knew it was me being needy, but he was being understanding since I just had been left at the altar. This was like a 7-month daily occurrence where she'd come into work and tell our coworkers an entire drama-filled make-believe friendship with me. None of it were true. She faked phone calls with me and made it seem like I called her 10x a shift, acting annoyed that I kept calling her while she was trying to work. I never called her, not once. I never hung out with her, never went to her house, never did anything she said, wasn't getting married, and certainly wasn't left at the altar. She just straight lied about me every single day for months on end while she was a stranger to me. She called the unit while I was working her shift, left a message at the desk for me to call her about going out that night. This was to back up her story with the staff that we were friends. But since they had filled me about everything, and she said I called her back from the unit and confronted her about everything she'd been telling people. She didn't respond to me. She just hung up and never came back to work. None of us saw her again. Story 2. My first job had a 23-year-old manager that would regularly flirt with me. Things like playful shoving and asking me why I was so perfect. The assistant manager was with a wife and kid and saw it one day and yelled at him that I was 16. And you could see the manager's soul leave his body. Pretty soon after that, I just stopped being scheduled. I worked at a restaurant during a time where I was struggling with some medication a psychiatrist put me on, and I was having regular debilitating panic attacks. I tried to privately let my manager know what was going on so that she didn't think I was slacking, and she showed my texts to everyone to laugh over it. It was my first restaurant job, and I was 19, so I admit I wasn't very good yet, and apparently that's enough reason to ridicule me for existing. I had another job at a cafe with a key shift that hated her life. One of those types that has worked somewhere she hates for a decade and blames all her younger coworkers for everything. She used to bully me so badly that customers complained. At a different cafe, I had a manager that was in his 40s and looked reasonably good for his age, but he was a total creep. He hired only girls in their early 20s on purpose because other guys would try and establish dominance. Yes, he said that to me directly. And he would proceed to try and get any new hire to go out on a date with him with the hopes that they would want to be a new mommy to his 5 kids. He also tried to text me non-work related stuff and get me to accept his friend request on FB, where he had a shirtless pic as his profile picture. Luckily, by this time, I had started to grow a pair, and I basically told him he was a weirdo, and he stopped liking me because I was too serious. I learned from the other girls that they were having similar creepy experiences, and how he loved to tell them all about his escapades, like getting to duck his buddy's daughter. I rallied everyone to go to HR over it, but nothing happened until he got wind that he was getting canceled and left to go be a plumber before we destroyed his life. Once the upper management heard he was leaving, they were suddenly interested in taking action with what we had to say. Had a creepy cook at a different restaurant who liked to pester my very nice coworker, and once when she was on the phone with a customer and couldn't move corded phone, he came over from the kitchen and put his arm around her and started whispering into her open ear. I shoved him off, told him no firmly. He liked to act like he didn't know English, but he knew that one. Complained, and he was fired sometime after. Unfortunately, it was for unrelated reasons, though. Had another coworker at that same restaurant that got dumped by his girlfriend and started being creepy towards the young girls there. I had worked with him a bit against my will, but all this started happening after I left. Then I had a really crafty office job ran by a family. So of course they could all do no wrong and would talk crap about you like crazy. Fun thing is, I had no idea they had a problem with me until I had the gall to ask for a raise after 3 other employees left or got fired. And I ended up with all their work in addition to mine. Suddenly, I was the worst employee making constant mistakes that they had been scrutinizing for months. I was so mad I looked for a new job while I worked there and ended up at my current one, which is thankfully amazing. But yeah, I would say most of my crafty coworkers were some kind of manager. There were lots of moments of suckage, but I am much stronger now than when I started out. Story 3. My first clinical research job at a pediatric hematology oncology clinic. My coworker and I got a boss after a month. She had a long resume and a PhD in nursing and was in her 60s, exact age unknown because she refused to say it. The problem was, her resume was long because she never stayed at a job longer than a year, with most being 3 to 6 months. I found out quickly why, and here they are. Was told a patient's name multiple times before a study visit, shown the patient's chart, still called the patient the wrong name, like not even close to her name. Got in arguments on the phone with her mortgage company for being late on her mortgage. She had 2 mortgages out on her townhome. This happened 3 times. Got in arguments with the physicians, 1, because she missed a meeting because she was seeing patients and just ran long because of 2 emergencies. Decided she didn't like my coworker for no reason other than he didn't want to give her daily updates on studies he was in charge of. I just gave her the same one every day and only changed dates of patient last visit. But still, it was weird because all the info was on the shared calendar. Started showing me emails from her fights with doctors, asking me to be on her side. I reported her to HR for that. She had home drama. She was divorced and had a boyfriend who was retired. She still paid to support his lifestyle, but decided she didn't like him not contributing, so she broke up with him and told him to get a job, all while still allowing him to live with her for free. He didn't get a job right away and was using her credit cards to take other women on dates. She found out and finally remived him off her credit cards, but still let him live there for free. He eventually got a job, but didn't want to date her again, but did still continue to live in her townhome for free. She then went on a date with a guy who lived in a weekly rate motel. She gave him money so he could be a cable TV installer. For those who don't know, when you get a job as a cable TV installer, they train you. He then had a heart attack, so she let him move in with her, again, for free, along with the other guy, 3 bedrooms in her townhome. Once recovered, he then proceeded to steal a ton of her stuff, pawn it for money, and disappear. Remember, they only had like a grand total of 2 dates. And what got her fired? She was supposed to be working on a poster presentation for pediatric cancer rates over the past decade in our area for presentation at a pediatric cancer conference. Conference was 2.5 months after she was hired. She did not, and could have easily asked me or my coworker for help. I kept the record of the state registry and had it all in an Excel spreadsheet with diagnosis counts and everything. She was rushing to get something together, but really didn't have much. She got the last flight of the day to the city for the conference because she still needed to print the poster that day. She arrived at the hotel at midnight, and sadly her credit card was declined for the incidentals on the room, already paid for by our job. So rather than call the 2 other people from our work, she called her brother in Boston, she was in Pacific time, and used his credit card. Finally got a room, but apparently was making a lot of noise. So someone complained to the front desk, and security told her to please be quiet. She got upset and complained to the front desk. The night manager just kicked her out. Since she had nowhere to go and her credit cards were maxed out, she went back to the airport and slept there. Then first thing in the morning, changed her ticket and flew home. She got fired 2 days later when the two people who were also at the conference returned. Story 4. Sigh, I will tell one story about this ducking half-wit crackhead. We were pharmacy techs and sterile compounders handling chemo pharmaceuticals, aka we take the IV bag and stick it with a pointy end to fill the bag with poisonous substance meant to kill cells. This needed to be sterile. We needed to be safe with appropriate PPE. We needed to be careful for many, many reasons. Non-hazardous medics can make you sick. Hazardous medics can ducking lost you. Half-wit crackhead just could not get it through her head. She made a lot of messes, tried to hide them, and almost never cleaned them for whatever reason. Except the once time I made her do it. I walk into the clean room and she leaves the hazardous compounding room and says, "I broke a vial, you have to clean it." This was her third chemo spill that week. I saw red. I said, "No, you've been trained." I trained her and she signed a form saying so. So turn around and go back in. This is a woman 30 years my senior. She huffs and whines about not knowing what to do, and I say, I'll talk her through it. Get her set up in the hazmat Buzz Lightyear suit, and I just walk her through every single step. Every step she needs a constant reminder of what step she's on like a literal child. You use the sweep end of the broom from the kit. You put it in the trash can. You sweep up the glass, and you put it in the trash can, the black trash can, with the black lid. Then you peroxide. The usual peroxide, yes, that spray bottle. You spray the spill, yes, the whole area. Now wait 5 minutes. Yes, set a timer. Did the timer go off? It's not time. It is still not time. It is finally time. Now you wipe it all up with paper towels. Yes, the usual paper towels. That also goes in the black trash bin. No, the one you just used with the black lid. Now spray the area with alcohol. Yes, the usual alcohol. Keep in mind we worked in a fishbowl with huge windows. Everyone is watching this. She is now crying. I am standing there and walking her through every micro step because it was like she was determined to do something even more wrong. So I'd step in and take over, but I didn't ducking budge, and I pissily micromanaged the ever-living duck out of her. Finally, we were done, and I said we could scrub out and deem the room safe. We step out. She gets the Buzz Lightyear hazmat head off and still with her chemo gloves on scrubs her face because her nose itched. Like rubbed her entire face and said, "My nose itched the entire time." And I just had no words like, what the duck, you just exposed yourself to everything. How stupid are you? I told her to go change her scrubs because she just cleaned a whole bunch of chemo substances and likely splashed her pants. She didn't get why. I told her to. After 20 minutes, she still hadn't and was wandering the main pharmacy, and I finally yelled at her to change her damn compromised clothes. She cried again. We reported her so many times for this crap, and she didn't get fired. Finally, she made some sexist and even some explicit remarks about a male coworker, and HR didn't like that, so they fired her. Story 5. When I worked in TV news, our department was a huge open room with cubicles around the outside, except for mine, the graphics desk, which was double the size of the others and sort of in the middle. Our on-air director was a weirdo, judgy, born-again Christian who couldn't shut up about whatever performative rage bait scene Hannity or Bill O'Reilly were babbling about every day. At the end of the late live newscast, everybody but him went home, leaving him alone in the building for a couple of hours while he dubbed and cataloged tapes, reset the studio, and did minor prep work for the next day. Most of our computers were unlocked at all times since coworkers frequently had to jump on them for last-minute graphics or script changes. I started getting subtle warnings from a manager in another department about being careful about web browsing habits and pay-per-view content on a converter in my cubicle. We were owned by the cable company, so it didn't generate an invoice, but the purchase got logged on the dummy account for that box. The only person it could be at the times that content was being accessed, was our born-again producer. Naturally, he made a big production out of being offended that I was harassing him by even implying that it was him. I put a keylogger on my computer and waited about a week. It captured the expected adult websites and a bunch of really unexpected ones. The reason the manager who tipped me off had such a weird look on his face when we spoke was that he was trying not to ask why I would be searching adult sites. Finding out that the holy rolling godbrother at work was into some pretty questionable kink was a hilarious surprise. He denied it. I printed the logs, showing these sites and searches in and among other content that was linked directly to him. I cleared my name with management, who didn't fire him, but they must have spoken to him. We worked together for another 2 very awkward years, and he never used my computer again. It's been 12 years, and every time I see him burning up Facebook with Bible quotes or lame Christo-fascist takes on the liberal agenda, I think of commenting with screen caps of those logs, which still exist on one of my hard drives. So either him or the unmedicated schizophrenic conspiracy theorist who would print entire websites and bring them to me so I could read the shocking truth about our government without ending up on a list. Between his crazy rants and his pummeling body odor, he was pretty hard to take. Story 6. Coworker fell asleep at his desk, and another coworker immediately ran to the boss and snitched on him. Turned out, the sleeping coworker was sick and didn't do it on purpose. Story 7. My coworker would crap in the one toilet we had and leave it for me to flush in the morning. She's dead now, though. She and her man were hit by her man's roommate because he snapped at the mess. She started her crap fatwa on me because our shop got exposed to COVID, and I put up a sign for our elderly customer base saying masks advised until this date, and her ass didn't like that. She said, "I've done my research, masks don't work." And I told her I didn't trust sources from someone who is incapable of flushing their own crap down the toilet. Well, I can't help if it won't flush, so you leave it for your coworker? I'd have to duck in KMs if any of y'all ever saw my crap. Oh yeah, we ducking had it out. Story 8. I was working at an equestrian center that also allowed special needs people to work there. I was one of those. One coworker had several mental health issues. I don't know which one it was, but in the end, everybody was done with him. Here are the things he did. The several stories about his life outside the equestrian center. He worked for the police, he had his own gym, he was friends with several famous people. There was a period when an actual police officer took riding lessons at the center because he wanted to join the mounted police. Coworker never left that poor man alone. He once had a relationship with a girl who also worked there. It was very unhealthy and he also stalked her. Even when the relationship ended, the girl was sent away, but they allowed her to return on the days when he didn't work. Coworker wasn't allowed to know that she worked at the center. Since then, no one was allowed to have his number, email, or whatever, because he never left you alone when you had his number. I was one of the few people he didn't stalk because he knew he couldn't sell his fake stories to me. I never outright told him it was bullcrap, but I once asked him if one of his supposed famous friend, a boxer, could come over to take riding lessons. I have never been so happy that somebody didn't like me and that I could be a bad listener sometimes, but it was another story for many coworkers and mothers of the kids who took lessons. Whenever a horse passed, he talked about horse hit the whole day. It was probably his way to process things, but not so fine horse girls to hear. He touched a female special needs coworker without consent. We told her this should be reported, and one of the instructors went to our boss. Only a short conversation, but no consequences for the annoying coworker. The only time my boss seriously considered to fire him was when he said some very nasty things to her. This coworker actually left shortly before I did. I didn't leave because of him, but because I got a better opportunity elsewhere. The worst thing about everything is that he didn't face any consequences for his actions because of his mental health, while the victims get sent away, and we weren't even allowed to exchange numbers. Not just with coworker, but not even with each other. And no, I'm not making this up. Story 9. Oh, my favorite was when I worked for a major cell phone store. They had a college training program. Recently graduated students would enroll, work all kinds of positions through a year-long stint, and then get placed in corporate. Training to be a retail store manager was one of the roles. Lots of college grads never worked a job, let alone retail. We had one come through that I still remember 10 years later. Mind you, this guy never worked a real job and came from old money. He glued all the real display phones to the counter because he didn't want anyone to steal them. He thought the cord attached wasn't good enough. He was very black and white with rules and would constantly argue with customers over policies and their contracts. He reorganized the stockroom to fit his improved inventory stock system that he designed himself. Manager was so pissed the next day. Mind you, inventory rules were set by corporate. He thought that working overtime off the clock was a way to help the store, and we should all do the same. One day, a girl was late because she had car trouble. He kept asking her what other cars she had to drive in. He didn't realize most people only have one car they drive. He argued with a person during an offer interview because they tried to negotiate their salary. He didn't understand why people cared about their salaries so much. They would such a thing. He finally broke one day and punched one of the sales guys in the back office. When the sales rep got mad, he wouldn't approve a new phone line. He kept saying over and over while he asked to leave, "No one here understands the value I bring to this store." My favorite thing, though, was the second week he was there, he drove his dad's Ferrari to the store to impress one of the girls that worked there. He didn't lock it up, and someone stole his laptop out of the passenger seat. We weren't in the best part of town, and he thought it wasn't that big of a deal to leave your car unlocked. Needless to say, he didn't make it out of the program. The sad part is, he apparently started his own business and is making a bunch of money, somehow. Story 10. I got my first job at 18 at a grocery store nearby that had a smoothie bar. I had this manager who gave off sweet old lady vibes, and she was very wise and had lots of health nutrition knowledge. However, her food safety was not up to par at all. She would clean our juicer, blenders, etc. in a concoction of bleach and cleaner meant for the sinks. Well, if I was closing, I would not use that solution as this is dangerous for our health and others' health as it's not food safe, nor is it the approved cleaning solution for these things. She also felt a certain way about me because my mom was the store manager who had to write her up before, and I got the brunt of her anger. One day, I was closing and I cleaned to the standard we were supposed to and left for the night. She always had something to say about how I looked, how I worked, and all that jazz. She made me feel so small a lot of the time. One day, I was closing and I cleaned to the standard we were supposed to and left for the night. I came in to grab my paycheck the next day since I was off. I looked over to the bar and to the whiteboard. We used to communicate any basic fruit counts, etc. She had written, "My name is not good at her job. She is lazy and makes our smoothie bar look dirty and unclean. Never be like my name." I was so embarrassed and hurt. She also started yelling at me in front of customers. My mom came over and cut this short. She mentioned to her that she cannot speak to any employee like this, and if she has an issue with employee performance, she can talk to management. She gave me the silent treatment for several shifts after that. Shortly after, I decided to change stores due to a change in the policy where family could work together. My manager sobbed and cried and bought me balloons, etc., and said I was her favorite and best employee, and she is sad to see me go. See, it made me actually laugh as she treated me poorly for so long, and now I was like a daughter to her. So odd. Story 11. Coworkers. The only one that I can think of is the guy who comes in ducked up on, start yelling incoherently, and wanders around when there are no tickets. But I'm a chef. Basically, no one is completely sober here, and he does the work and no one else applies, so. Another worker here just rambles absolute nonsense, and every word out of her mouth is a non sequitur. But for managers, so duck and many. One place was a delivery. So I'm in front of customers, and two separate managers were telling me mutually exclusive things to do. And when I dialed do one, the other manager would show up to say to do the other, and then I would do that. And the first manager would come out screaming to do the opposite. Until after a minute, they were both in the middle of the crowded restaurant, standing a foot away on opposite sides of me, screaming for a moment over each other until I just duck and took my apron off and left. The actual store manager at that place also wouldn't allow me to take breaks even on a 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. shift, and then would cut my actual work time in the clock to be 8 hours because I was supposed to take breaks but didn't. Another restaurant in my literal first seconds being there, the shift lead came running down the line, screaming about how I was burning everything. I was worthless. Why did they even hire me if I'm so ducking awful? The store managers always just looked the other way, and it never got better. No other place would hire me though, so I had to stay. As ducked up as it is to say, COVID actually saved my ass there. Then the reason I'm a chef here is because the old chef stole from the owner and caused him to relapse and die, at least I think. No one told me explicitly, and I'm just putting things together, and when we were having a meeting about what to do, if we were going to keep the restaurant going ourselves or what, several people ran the old chef out. So that guy might win. Story 12. A guy in my department who wasn't particularly likable or a friend, but we sat near each other and talked about sports a lot, so he was a work friend, I guess. Asked me if I could help him move out of his apartment since I had a truck. I go help this guy move a couch and a dresser and a few things on my own time on a Saturday in the middle of summer. We get almost everything loaded up, and I'm standing there, and some guy in his apartment offered me a beer, a Coors Light. I'm sweating my ass off, so a nice cold beer sounded great. Drank the beer, finished loading up, and we get on the road. I come in first thing Monday to my boss needing to speak to me about how it was reported that I was drinking and driving. This ducking guy, who I did a favor for, ran to our boss first thing on Monday to tell her about me having that beer. Never wanted to punch someone in the mouth so hard in my life. Story 13. Worked with a woman who would steal people's lunches out of the fridge. Not snacks either. Full homemade meals. We set up a hidden camera, with HR's reluctant blessing, and caught her red-handed. Her defense? She claimed she was sampling them to promote culinary diversity in the office. She wasn't joking. Last I heard, she was fired and tried to sue for wrongful termination. Absolute madness. Story 14. Nicole and her stepfather. Nicole was the boss's stepdaughter, and she lacks any redeeming qualities. She was simultaneously lazy, high, childish, untrustworthy, mean, and above all else, dumb. I was in charge of training her, and she's the single biggest reason why I ended up leaving that job. The mistakes Nicole made on a daily basis would get any other employee suspended and or fired if they repeated the same error twice in ever. Expensive mistakes that sent clients looking to other providers. I spent an extra 90 minutes after every shift going through Nicole's work, trying to fix whatever I could find. I couldn't do it doing normal hours because asking her to clarify or pointing out errors would inevitably end up with Boss Man, her stepdad, having a sit down with me, telling me I'm too hard on her, nitpicking, and it's my fault for creating a stressful workplace that no one could possibly succeed in. Never mind that the other 4 of us succeeded for years without her, and the days she called in sick were the only ones without chasing her screw-ups. Example, she took an order and wrote Thursday the 5th for delivery. Except Thursday is the 1st, and it's tomorrow when I definitely don't have the capacity to squeeze in an extra order, which is something we told you repeatedly. Nicole, is it possible that you meant Monday the 5th, or maybe next Thursday, the 8th? This question resulted in her, a 44-year-old woman, running out of the office in hysterical tears like a toddler, and my boss coming to visit accusing me of not trusting her work. I was dismissed without pay the following day. They sent $3,000 worth of product to the client's location before realizing no one was there, and the job site wasn't even close to ready. And other clients were pissed because their product was late, because 3 trucks that I had allocated to their jobs were pulled for her duck-up. I could go on endlessly about all the ways Nicole was just awful. Story 15. I was harassed and physically and mentally by a male coworker. It only got worse after I put in a complaint because he was friends with one of the managers who happened to be the owner's son. When I finally couldn't take anymore and quit, he was promoted to manager shortly after. Most of the women who worked on his shift ended up quitting for simulator reasons. Not me, but my husband had a weird feeling about the new manager they hired at his work. He instantly did not like him from the first day but couldn't put his finger on why. He found out the new guy was dating one of the other managers. Things start going bad in their relationship and she breaks up with him. She asks and is moved to a different store location, which she is. One day my husband tells me his manager just didn't show up for work. That night as he's reading the local news, there's a story about both managers. Apparently after they broke up, he hooked up a cell phone to her car so her could track her. He then kidnapped her, beat her. He stole meds from a vet's office and threatened to hit her with them. Someone saw her banging on a window for help and called the cops. He was arrested. Somehow he got bail and then proceeded to try and run her down with his car while she was getting her mail. He ended up getting only 7 YRs in federal prison, which is nuts. She came to a mutual friend's wedding 3 days after the first attack. She had a handprint bruise around her neck. She said she refused to let him control or ruin her life. She met a guy at the wedding and they became friends, which turned into them getting married years later. Story 16. I swear I was going crazy because of her. Both of us started together and afterwards some other girls came along to join our team. I was inexperienced and she had experience, so she helped me a lot in the beginning. When other girls started joining, we kind of separated and became close to other girls. She was extremely jealous when I became close to other girls, even though she was close to other girls as well. Crazy thing is that afterwards she would text me stuff, work-related, just berating me and trying to make a fight, question my work and that. But then when we see face to face, she would act like nothing happened and would be really sweet. Like when I'm eating, she would fix my hair so it won't get in the way, bring me water. But sometimes she would humiliate me on purpose, like saying, "Did you even brush your hair today?" We had to tie our hair tight and I have the typical pin straight Asian hair and it would come out of the tie here and there, make extremely inappropriate comments about my body with guys. And she had a close friendship with the guy coworkers and they'll talk explicitly about sex and what they did with their partner last night, and would humiliate me when I looked disgusted. One time, she pointed at my breast and said, "Hers are big," because she played with herself and was like, "Guess her nipple colors," in front of the male coworkers. But then she would come to me and talk about her family problem, tell me about what all the other coworkers are saying behind my back, stay with me till 8 p.m. even though it takes her an hour to get back home, and it was already getting late. I swear my sanity was breaking apart the longer I worked there, not to mention the workplace was filled with insane people. Story 17. I worked for a grocery retailer's head office doing store audits. My great coworker went on mat leave and the replacement we got was one of the most unhinged people I've ever worked with. I spent 3 months training her and when her training was over, I went on vacation for 2 weeks. She was abrasive and I got many comments about how she was stalking people, mildly threatening them, and sending weird emails to people she would have just met. When I went on vacation, she completely fell off her rocker and waged an all-out war on about 6 store managers. She wrote an email about one particular manager who was a nice guy and I really liked him. That was the most threatening and all-out abusive thing I've ever read. Instead of sending it to me or my director, why she would do this, I have no idea. She sent it directly to the person she was referring to. About 3 hours before I started work, she blew up my phone with texts about how she thinks she's getting fired today. This is when I opened up my email for the first time since I went on vacation and found hundreds of email complaints about her. She was right. 15 minutes after I started work, the fired with cause email came out and she was gone. I ran into her at an industry function about 4 years later, and she saw me and came over and loudly reminisced about her firing in great detail with several of her coworkers around. They all turned white with horror, and within 2 weeks she was gone from that job too. Haven't seen her since. Story 18. I worked with a veterinary assistant who was probably the most unpleasant, mean-spirited person I've had to spend any significant amount of time near. This was at my first job after graduating from vet school. She was 2 years older than me, and I think part of her problem was that she resented veterinarians who weren't older than her. She was horrible to other assistants and technicians too, though. Generally, anyone who wasn't either kissing her ass or signing her paychecks. When I asked her to do anything, normal job duties, she'd roll her eyes, pretend she couldn't hear me, and or do a half-assed job of whatever it was until I just started doing those things myself if no one else was available, because it wasn't worth it. Whenever the boss was around, she'd be on good behavior, and she made sure to stick, for the most part, to doing things that would make anyone reporting her look petty. We, at one point 3 vets together and other employees at different times, still complained about her, but nothing happened other than her getting talked to, which did nothing. She also had an addicted boyfriend, eventually husband, that she'd have prolonged arguments over the phone with in the middle of the workday sometimes. She'd try to tell me, wrongly, what I was supposed to be doing sometimes, but I just ignored those. Stupid stuff like trying to tell me I couldn't leave 10 minutes before closing when everything was finished and all our appointments were done, even though the actual boss did this too, and she had no authority over me. I just said okay and kept walking. Eventually, she did get fired for bullying because she got sloppy, but it took way too long. Story 19. I have 3 terrifying obsessive man with whom I was initially quite friendly because we had the same taste in literature and film. Unfortunately, he developed an intense attraction to the celestially beautiful Bosnian woman who worked directly opposite us on our team, and it got so bad that he was transferred and then maybe fired, although I'd left the company by then. He rambled on to me about her all the time, made threats whenever I told him to cool it, and was completely delusional. I didn't dare tell him that she'd jokingly asked me to marry her once. 2. A guy who had interviewed me for the job, as the former manager of the function I was taking off his plate. Initially, we got along very well, but I quickly discovered that he was absolutely incapable of giving direct answers to direct questions. And worse, whenever he believed that I'd made any kind of minor procedural error, he'd CC my boss and try to get me into trouble. I won't share information, and then I'll make you face the consequences of not knowing the information I won't share. His terribleness was subtle, but it was still terrible. I bristle every time I think of him. 3. A woman at the same company as number 2 who was the owner of several functions I occasionally needed to provide information to external vendors about, but who always denied all knowledge whenever I asked her about any of it. She was also continually on the phone, grousing shrilly about something or someone from 2 cubicles away. As with number 2, we were friends until I discovered that she was a giant liability professionally. It's worth noting that I was probably flagged as number 2 and number 3's worst colleague myself. I had this job right around the time I separated from my ex-wife, and although I started competently, by the end of my tenure there, I was a non-functional, burned out, self-medicating hot mess. Story 20. This is pretty mild compared to many I've read here, but I've been lucky with most of the people I've worked with directly. Had a guy on my team at an old job where I did it help desk. He was good at his job, but had 2 major issues. He never wrote anything down or properly created tickets, and he was constantly very, very late. The worst day was during the lead up to Thanksgiving. It was usually our busiest time because everyone was trying to get stuff done before the holidays. Our team has 3 guys, myself, this coworker, and another guy who was out sick this particular day. I had a super full schedule, seeing a ton of our people with laptop issues, installs, etc. Well, the morning comes and, sure enough, he's nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, people start showing up for him, saying he scheduled them for X time or another. Some were critical issues. So I had to juggle both our schedules for the whole morning until he finally rolled in 3 hours late. Gave a half-assed apology and didn't seem like he thought it was an issue. I was angry all day long. When it was time to leave, I hurried out and started to head home. About 5 minutes into my drive, he calls me asking if I can come back because his car ran out of gas in the parking lot. Somehow, he didn't notice the fuel light. Being way too nice, I drove back, took him to the gas station, and took him back to his car. The next morning, he isn't there again. I'm livid, but I find out after a couple hours that this time he's not there because he got fired. I guess they were done with his bullcrap as much as I was. Story 21. I have a coworker who lives in her own reality, which is frightening because we work healthcare. She gets verbally aggressive with patients, gives medical advice. She's not a clinician. Countless patient complaints. Yells at coworkers. She's been talked to multiple times by management, but nothing has changed. Baffles my brain every day. Story 22. When I worked for Hollywood Video, there was a day when I was called into the store before it got robbed. When I got to the store, the assistant manager met me at the door. He walked me to the back where the office was and told me to sit down. He then grabbed the remote and told me I needed to watch the security tape from the night before. He pressed play, and what I saw has been burned into my brain and will never leave. The video was split into 4 different video feeds from the 4 cameras we had in the store. In one of the feeds, you see me talking to a female coworker. I had gone into the store to grab a few movies and was in the process of checking out. The coworker had asked me to go get the manager because she needed change. I walked to the back where the office was, but turned around when I realized I had my keys on me. I was also a manager. I turned back around and went and helped the coworker before leaving. In the feed for the office, we see the other manager do HJ to the female coworker. He had started before I got there, so it was about to me. When he is ready to finish, he kneels in front of the desk and end onto the floor underneath the desk. I was equally disgusted and humored. I felt bad for the female coworker and was glad she didn't walk in on him. The dude was fired on his next shift. The thing was, we were all very comfortable at the store, so we would walk around without our shoes on sometimes. We also have no idea how many times he did this. Story 23. My department was saddled with a chronic complainer. The guy complained about everything. The office is too cold, the lights are too bright, the turkey in the cafeteria is processed, our computer monitors aren't big enough, the chairs aren't high enough, %80 401k matching is bullcrap. He was just a dark cloud of misery. He would start almost every sentence with, "You know what I hate?" or "You know what sucks?" You saw him coming and you would just cringe and brace for the onslaught. He took a week off for vacation, and he still came into work for a few hours every day. He would come in and eat at the cafeteria, and then just sit next to random people and just start chatting with them. Weird. He didn't have a car and didn't drive, so he was always bumming rides from people. One time our team was doing a 3-day training module. At the end of the 3rd day, the woman who was running the training decided to end the last day on a fun note, so she made a Jeopardy-esque trivia game. He gave an answer and the trainer called it wrong and he lost his ever-loving mind. He threw a grade school tantrum and demanded his answer be made correct. At the end of the day, we're all walking out to the parking lot and this guy couldn't let it go. He spent the entire 10-minute walk complaining about the game. My friend was tasked with driving the guy home that night. I texted my friend later on that night to see how the drive home was. Apparently, the complainer spent the whole ride home pitching a fit about his answer being called wrong. Some people get old without growing up. Story 24. I used to work in shipping, receiving in a fast-paced environment. We had huge orders that needed to be processed as quickly as possible with accurate counts. I had a coworker who was the buyer for most of said orders. The way our inventory system worked was that if 2 users were accessing the same record, the user who was in it first would be the one who could edit, and the other was locked out. She would often open the record for an order, call to tell me the order was a rush job, and then duck off somewhere, leaving me locked out of the order with her nowhere to be found. At first, I asked her not to do that. She didn't listen. She did this so many times that I had to file a grievance because it was impacting my job and the operation. It was never taken seriously. One day, I was so fed up that I went up to her office and backed out of the screen myself. She had a huge meltdown and sent me a long email about how inappropriate that was. I completely ignored it. Anyway, I've moved on from that job a few years ago, so now I can say duck you, Aaron. You bleach blonde, basic Karen, intellectually stunted hose beast. I wish you the worst. Story 25. I worked at a library for almost a decade, and one of my coworkers was the epitome of white woman boomer. Within 2 hours of my first day, I had gotten the whole backstory of her ankle tattoo, her boob job, and her divorce. Patrons would come in and ask her how she was doing, and without fail, she'd answer, "I'm fine now, after my divorce." Her divorce happened in 2008. If she did something wrong or made a mistake, she'd throw someone else under the bus for it. She'd take personal calls at all hours during the workday, and she talked loudly. I'm sure she got stuff done, but every time I happened to see her screen, she was online shopping. She was super nosy and would constantly question you over things like your appearance, your clothes, the way you styled your hair that day, etc. When I moved into a new apartment with my partner, the only question she asked me about it was how much the rent was. She complained about anything she could and was super gossipy. She would try to goad you into saying bad things about other coworkers, so that she could then go to that coworker and tell them what you said. She also started a rumor that my supervisor treated me horribly when it was announced that I had taken a position elsewhere, even though it wasn't true at all. She got on my nerves so much that I once picked up a book to read, saw that one of the main characters had the same name as her, and I immediately put it down because I couldn't stomach reading her name over and over. Story 26. Worked in the hospitality industry at a Marriott property as front desk night audit. One coworker would sit at the front desk eating and watching his sports games or adult film at full volume on his phone. He'd leave crumbs everywhere, from the counters to the floors, and wouldn't clean them up. He had multiple journals he'd write his sports bets down on, and they were all over front desk counters. He'd leave the only employee restroom full of crap on the seat or inside or with urine stains drops all over the seat and floor. It was around COVID, so we had to do laundry. He wouldn't do it. I know about the adult film because I'd often show up an hour early to get started on the laundry he was supposed to do but didn't. Also, guests would come complain to me about him. We also had a guest tell him they had a leak in their bathroom. He didn't contact maintenance or do anything, much less write up a maintenance work order. It leaked so bad it flooded and came through the ceiling down to the lobby and the breakfast area. He'd rent rooms to ignorant drunks who you could easily tell were going to give us problems and tell me it was my problem, not his. I stopped cleaning up after him. I had been documenting it all because I worked there to serve the guests, not my nasty coworkers. Management would say to cut him some slack. Everyone complained about him. Finally, we all stopped and let management see firsthand exactly what we were talking about. They fired him twice and still brought him back. I believe he's still there now. Story 21. Yo, coworker heard I had a spare room. I wasn't advertising, red flag, but my bleeding heart. Long story short, my partner at the time and I felt bad for him and let him into our home. He did not like that my partner and I told him to clean up after himself. So he finished in my partner's shampoo. Partner's bald, is a tradie, and shampoos his beard every day to clean the dust from his beard from construction sites. Got a phone call from then partner telling me to get home ASAP so he doesn't go to jail. Told me what happened, was in denial. Because contrary to the internet, you can't handle what happens in reality, and both of us was in denial. Kicked him out eventually the next day. He's still known to this day as Shampoo Cum Dumpster in the industry. I got told 3 years ago that coworkers don't let him anywhere near something that looks like a shampoo bottle. I worked at that job 10 years ago. Story 28. This was a long time ago. My coworker loved to have inside knowledge and access to anything and everything. They would convince new hires to give them their social security card to make copies of. They held on to files of employees, including those we would never interact with. They had a crush on a coworker, found his file and went to his home unannounced, texted him incessantly, full-blown stalking and blackmailing him, making their life a living hell because they didn't want to date. We worked with children and they would befriend middle high school aged kids. They would drive them to go to movies together, take them home, play video games. All of the children were male. It was very odd. This coworker also would incentivize the kids to be competitive and form cliques. They'd give preferential treatment to the kids they befriended and put down the other for not being good enough. This includes using race to tell kids they weren't good enough, make fun of their parents' finances for not being rich enough, calling kids stupid, etc. They also used company money to buy themselves thousands of dollars of personal items. They lied about their hours to get an insane amount of overtime paid out to them. They lied about credentials to bring in chemicals to do a project. I'm talking about science lab chemicals. These chemicals were toxic, combustible, and we had no way to dispose of them or store them properly. My coworker would pour them down the sink. Anyone who went against them, they would make their life a living hell. It was insane. Story 29 had a coworker who would file complaints over the most innocuous comments. As in, man, it's gloomy out there. She claimed gloomy was directed at her. Our boss thought it was bullcrap and suggested that I avoid interacting with said colleague, which resulted in a complaint against me that I was not supporting a collegial environment. It all went nowhere, but it was exhausting. Eventually, they had enough of her act and found a way to get rid of her. Story 30. Husband and wife worked at the same company. I was the manager in the department the wife worked at. One day she had to leave due to a family emergency. Her husband told her some really weird story about how a biker gang tried to attack him. The next day I got a call from the police department for a statement on what had happened when she left that evening. Turns out her husband was on a 3-day substances bender and forced her into their car at gunpoint, and then drove 100+ mph on the freeway at 5 a.m. threatening to hit her and the kids. He crashed the car and someone stopped to help them. The wife jumped out of the car when he was distracted and got into the bystander's truck and asked him to flee. The husband emptied his rifle into the bystander's truck, lost the driver. He then walked over to her and killed her as well. Then he called the cops and calmly told them what he had done and waited for them to show up. She was an amazing person for the few weeks I knew her. Her husband, aside from the substances, had severe PTSD and would constantly beat her. Just an all-around horrible person. They did not cross paths much at work, but when they did, he would have private conversations with her, basically scolding her for something little. Story 31. Warehouse workers crap his pants in front of C-level management. We had an eccentric older gentleman that worked as a generic maintenance man around our offices and warehouse. He was very nice, but very, very strange. Talked to himself a lot, walk around eating an entire onion like it was an apple, liked to pick through the women's restroom trash, like really strange behavior. Anyways, one day while I was touring the warehouse and our new wireless data entry and scanning system we were having installed with some of our C-level executives, he comes running into the warehouse, and in front of all of us, he yells out, "I need to go home. there's been a terrible accident. I can't stay here." And of course, our warehouse manager was genuinely concerned and asked, "Are you okay? What's wrong? Can we help?" Skylar, that was his real name, just started shaking his head and said, "I need to leave right now." At that very moment, he went to step, and out of his pant leg dropped a gigantic turd. Just fell right onto the floor, and we all looked at it, then at each other, then back at him. He nonchalantly grabbed it with his bare hand and underhand, threw it into a garbage can, and walked out. Needless to say, we figured that him crapting his pants was his giant emergency. Story 32. Not my story, but my coworkers. So I work in media and broadcasting. We always have to have ears up and eyes open. My coworker boss had to hire a guy because of ADA hiring rules, and he was deaf. This was before FaceTime and texting. You can be colorblind in this industry, but deaf? No. You have to listen to the commands and what is being said. Visually, I'm sure the guy was great, but live broadcasting, you have a second or two to react when given commands. You cannot convey that stuff instantly to a deaf person. Even worked with people with language barriers, but they could get the general point. This guy couldn't because of his disability. He had to mic reporters and stuff, but he couldn't hear. There is on broadcast standard boards that you can see the levels of if it's too loud or not loud enough, but there's also the factor of how it sounds, which you can't tell by just looking at it. You have to listen for pitch, frequency, if it sounds distorted or the signal is bad, etc., that you cannot do without ears. Even if you're colorblind visually, there is scopes and vectors and tools that you can use to get the color right. Sound though, not really. Apparently, he lasted 2 weeks. Story 33. Wife worked at a large office building with multiple tenants, and they had to remove all paper towels from the bathroom because someone was clogging the toilet every day with them. My wife left there for a new job, but her coworkers she kept in touch with said they moved to the new building and toilet issues started again. So the person causing the issue was in their company. Story 34. At my last job, the owners would buy us all lunch the last Friday of the month. They would announce where they were going, take everyone's order, go out, get it, and then bring it back. They would place them all in the break room for us to get at our convenience. One coworker would go back and sample everyone's food, decide which one he liked best, even if he didn't order it, and take that one. So, if you got a burger and fries, he didn't limit himself to just a couple of fries. You would find a bite taken out of your burger. If he decided he liked it best, that was his lunch, and you had to eat his order or just starve. After a couple months of this, enough of us complained, so when they brought lunch back, they delivered it right to your desk. Naturally, he complained, and no matter how we tried to explain it to him, he thought that he was entitled to try everyone's lunch and pick what he thought was the best one. He claimed some sort of discrimination against him and left after about 6 months of this, citing his unfair lunch treatment as one of the reasons for his leaving. Story 35. We got a new MAGA receptionist, Gina, during COVID, who used to start weird random conversations anytime spent more than 6 seconds near the reception desk. One time she cornered me and started spewing insane MAGA speak about Fauci and the CDC, blah blah blah. I refuted a couple of things, then decided to stop wasting my time with her. I told her I don't like to discuss politics at work and went to my office. Not 5 minutes later, a friend and another dept came to tell me Gina told her I had started the politics chat and verbally attacked her in the reception area. Straight up lied and made it into a thing where Gina, dept head, and I had a closed door sit down to straighten things out. Luckily, by then she'd well proven herself as a total nut job. But the entire experience was exhausting. I saw her a few months ago at a bar, and she beelined over to give me a hug and tell me how much she'd liked me and enjoyed working with me. Story 36. This I won't forget. I work in fast food, so there is potential for a lot of issues. Case in point, this one board guy. I wouldn't call him a slacker, but I would say he doesn't handle stress well, like me, sadly. There'd be times during lunch rush where he'd launch mistake sandwiches into the trash can at Mock Duck, which my manager didn't like. One day, he was scheduled to be in, and that day, it was me and my manager. We barely managed, since I had to juggle front counter and drive through, and our rushes are harder due to being in a gas station along a major state highway. Don't worry, we're good quality. He comes strolling in a few hours late in the middle of the rush, laughing like he didn't screw me and my manager over. My manager pulls him into her office to talk about this while I'm making a shake for an order. IDK how long they were talking, but he storms out of her office and slams the door, quitting on the spot. So that was fun to have happen. But at the least, we've hired good people after that. Story 37. I have this coworker that I had to report to HR due to a sort of harassment. It started when I said hi to him once, and after that we started to greet each other almost daily. Out of a sudden, he started catching me in my break smoking with my BF and would scold me for smoking, sort of like an annoying father. Not really mean. Then it started escalating. I'm overweight. And he started lecturing to me that I should eat more healthy every time he saw me eating whatever at the office. He dropped off a religious brochure at my office desk about how God could help me lose the weight. He saw me eating a lipop while I was at my work computer and got really upset, mentioning how he had told me several times already that I had to eat more healthy. The next day, he greeted me and dropped a bottle of brand new nuts and dry berries, saying, "That's what I should be eating." I couldn't help but cry as I felt that he was fat-shaming me. HR report after that, and he stopped completely talking to me. Story 38. This coworker was in a Christian cult, not calling Christianity a cult, just the group this guy was in. And he believed that he and his little gang were blessed by God with the ability to speak in tongues and tell the future. I was new, and he kept pushing his group on me and saying that he felt I needed a future-telling sesh based just on me. I turned him down nicely, always, and I shouldn't have been nice, because he did it anyway and handed me a tape of my session that he'd done without my okay. And when he handed it to me, he said, "God says you'll be okay in the end." My dumbass played it in the car on the way home and didn't get past the proclamation that I'd be kidnapped and repeatedly assaulted by a guy that looked, surprise, just like him. I ejected the tape and threw it out on the highway. And yes, I went to my boss. Boss said not to worry. He'd be leaving in a week or two to become a missionary in Turkey. Turkish people, I am so sorry. Story 39. When I was 19, I worked at a car dealership. One morning, I overhear my boss on a call with this other employee, and it went like this. "What do you mean you're not coming into work today? What do you mean your company truck got stolen? What do you mean escorts?" This guy went out the night before with the company vehicle to the bar and had some drinks. He thought to himself, "I shouldn't drive as I've been drinking." Reasonable. He proceeds to hire 2 ladies of the night. When they get to the hotel, the girls said they were going to run to get some smokes. The guy says, "It's raining out. Don't walk. Take my truck. I'll wait for you up in the room." He goes upstairs and passes out. The girls take the truck and live the life up. Police said it can't be reported as stolen because he gave them the keys. They found it 2 months later with the girls driving it. Guy kept his job, was on probation, and had to get his wife to drive him to work. Yes, his wife. Story 40. I had a coworker once get fired for harassment, but since he was getting reprimanded for dead naming me at the same time, he was getting reprimanded for the harassment, but before the firing. He conflated the two and, I guess, blamed me for getting him in trouble. From then on, he tried to designate himself as my nemesis or something, always trying to trip me up, bringing in a portable speaker and blasting his music over mine, trying to convince our superiors that I was harassing him. Even after he got fired, I ended up running into him on our next job, where he got worse, tried to act like he was my immediate superior, even though I was hired on as the pastry chef, always meddling in my work or telling me I was wrong, even though he didn't know jack crap about pastry. When he eventually got fired from there, it wasn't even anything to do with me. Again, he assaulted the hostess because he blamed her for his knives getting stolen out of his car. I never saw him again after that. Good riddance. Story 41. I had a coworker who was a cashier and was only here for a few months. He was gay, but he was the type who made it his whole personality and made sure you knew it. On his last day, whenever he finished ringing up a customer's order, he'd tell them, "Have a happy gay day." A middle-aged guy came into the line, and he witnessed it all, and he did not like it at all. He and the coworker got into an argument while he was ringing him up. When his order was finally done, he still told him to have a happy gay day. The guy went to our manager to complain. The coworker was pulled back to the manager's office. He came stomping out and said he was fired and made a whole scene as he was walking out. For the next few months, he came back as a customer with a body cam just to try and prove that our company was homophobic. Story 42. Was new to a company and worked with a woman who wasn't my boss on paper, but for all intents and purposes was my superior. Absolute control freak, micromanager, you know the type. One day, she absolutely blows up on me during a call, making false claims that I am not doing my work. Claims that I ended up being able to refute directly to HR with email proof. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Get ahead. She had been with the company for about 15 years while I'd only been there a few months. And she was very good at what she did, other than being insufferable. I decided to just cut my losses and put in my 2-week notice rather than stick it out or fight it. Cut to local HR, the local CEO. We were a multi-billion-dollar corp. And eventually corporate HR calling to offer me a different job if I'm willing to stay and explain what happened. I accept. She quits without notice about 2 months later after over 15 years with the company. Whoops. Story 43. Worked with a former EMT who was prescribed some pretty nasty painkillers and other meds. I'd watch her throw in a patch on at work, pop a substance, and throw on another patch because she forgot she had one on. Went to our boss, not to snitch, but because I genuinely was worried she would end her life. She wasn't fired, just given a talking to by our boss and HR department. She didn't learn anything, got worse, and started offering me her meds to keep my mouth shut. Story 44. We had a poop bandit at ours. We had no idea if Iz was a disgruntled janitor or a homeless person that was able to sneak in through the back door. Of course, the cameras never worked. Literally, someone would crap and leave it where it landed or do a crap job at cleaning it up. That would usually mean we'd see a whole log chilling on the floor. One time I walked into a single bathroom and sat down to do my business. Noticed it stunk more than usual, and noticed that someone had crap on the floor and tried to clean it up, but all they did was smear it into the grout. This was also at the tail end of COVID. Multiple people had incidents. It was even brought up to management and brought up in several meetings. Not sure if it ever got solved. I quit not long after. Everyone was grossed out about it, but I'd be lying that we all got a kick out of management trying to figure it out as we hated them. Story 45. Older guy I used to work with. He was a bully, always had to have everything his way, and would raise a stink with management whenever he didn't like something, not very good at his job, too rough and uncaring with our patients, fell asleep constantly. But he was friends with one of the doctors and close to retirement, so he was unfreeable. On top of all that, he was a cranky old idiot, brainwashed by Fox News. He was always commenting on those liberals and make little awful comments. He had to mysteriously take the next day off. I'm going. He had to go to some seminar that he moped through. Story 46. Don't want to get into specifics, but turned what used to be unofficial easy days into standard work days. Management and lower admin were on board with things too. Well, this brown-nosing a hole that didn't really have much seniority decided to go to the top and make a report. Since it was documented, those easy days were ruined. Everybody couldn't stand this person beforehand due to this kind of bullcrap. But after it was much worse, this person would snitch on everything. If you were a minute late from break, running straight to the office, walked into the bathroom and you were texting, straight to the office. Need to walk outside for work-related things and snuck in a smoke, straight to the office. He kept a little notebook and would always be writing things down around people too. I don't know why leadership just never told him to knock it off. Story 47. My coworker recently called me a loser that no one wants around. We all laugh at you. Yes, I am gay, and yes, she said it violently. I had to send it to my boss, but nothing has been done about it. I'm not mad at my boss. We're a small business, and I really love working there. I've since blocked her and don't speak to her, but it's awkward seeing her in person. We work alone on our shifts, and when she comes to relieve me, always late, I feel so much tension. And the worst part is that she got at me for leaving and locking the store when she was 30 minutes late, and I had to go. So it made her look bad, as it should. So now she thinks I'm the one who should be getting ignored. If she apologized, I'd let it go so we can actually talk about professional matters, but this woman is Delulu. Story 48. Coworker had some medical issues that made her smell bad. Super sweet lady. She apologized all the time for it, but it's fine, none of my business. Well, boss made her get up in the middle of a meeting and tell everyone in the office her medical condition, 5 to 6 of us total. He would then throw dry erase markers at her because she didn't catch on to what he was saying fast enough, or whatever reason he made up in his head. Said boss also threw a chair across the room when I asked a question at a different time. Yeah, we don't work there anymore. And he retired shortly after. Other job? Boss and coworkers would brag about the substances they would use during the work holiday parties each year and how ducked up they'd get. They let me go within 3 weeks of being hired, and Teeb, I'm not even mad. I don't want to work in that environment. Story 49. A bad boss. Started a new job, and my boss lost absolute crap the first day when I was muted when others were talking about something I wasn't even involved in. He basically was convinced I was working a second job, so he kept being a nightmare to try to catch me in the act. He then fired me shortly after, even though I did everything they asked for. I'm quite convinced he had a major substances habit since he was extremely aggressive, suspicious, insecure, and sounded like he was ripping fat lines on all the calls. I feel bad about the others that are stuck under his control and his poor family. No one should have to put up with that. In the end, I feel like I dodged a major bullet and ended up in a better position with a great boss. Here's to hoping he changes or nature finds a way to make things right. Story 50. I had a coworker report me to HR because I wasn't pronouncing her first name correctly. It's not a super common name, but it's definitely not unknown, Irish origin. And with the spelling, there really is only one way to pronounce it. But she decided that her name needed to be pronounced a certain way. She actually added a third syllable to the normal way the name was pronounced. I apologized profusely and told her that the reason I mispronounced it was because I knew half a dozen women in my rather large, extended Irish family that had that name, and it was pronounced a certain way. Didn't matter to her, and she reported me to HR. She left the company 6 months after this incident, and when I talked to people that actually worked side by side with her, they said she was the biggest pain in the ass they had ever worked with. Story 51. I was conducting orientation, and one of the new hires nodded out during the presentation. She was in her 40s and looked the part for the position, so it was surprising. After I woke her up, she adjusted her dentures, excused herself, and came back from the bathroom high-af on speed. Later that day, I Googled her and found that she had missed the prior orientation because she had been in jail. After meeting everyone, she started panhandling in the office, and we fired her immediately. The recruiting department got ripped for a terrible job of vetting her. I walked her out of the building, and when we got to the sidewalk, she started crying because she didn't have any money for the metro. I gave her $20 to get home, and when she put it in her purse, I could see she had about $100 cash already. Unbelievable. Story 52. Worked with a guy at Chipotle 15 years ago who got in trouble for twice accidentally bumping his elbow against a coworker's breast while working in close proximity. The first time seemed like a mistake, but the second one was like, really, dude? He quit shortly thereafter by coming in and saying that he had to turn in his gun and badge because he got a new job and started immediately. Turns out he was starting a jail sentence for arson and crafting on the front desk on camera of the library that he had tried to burn down after starting the fire. He was hired after this had happened, but before he got sentenced and sent to jail, and that's when the GM at the time started Googling everyone's name first before hiring them. Story 53. It was a British coworker of mine when I was teaching at a university in China. He was a heavy drinker who would get violent at times. He went berserk one morning and attacked a secretary, beating her and giving her a neck injury. He punched a security guard who intervened, then smashed his hand through a window. He ran off to his on-campus apartment. He was told he had 3 days to leave the country. At the end of the 3 days, staff entered his apartment and found there was whitish film all over the furniture. They took it to a field near the school and burned it. Story 54. I sat next to this crazy Karen that would sit at her computer and talk to herself all day long, non-stop, about the coding she was doing. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I'll move this down there and tra-li-la, ding. It'll address that nicely. Ding-dong. Ho, yeah, this will work. Execute, go. Yes. Okay, now, to move this whole section over a bit and trim. Yes, bing bong, yeah. Some more test data, yeah. Inject the row. Woo, all damn day long. It was like something North Korea would do to you if they caught you. And yes, before you ask, I tried noise-canceling headphones. Ineffective. She would do this at conversational levels, and you could still hear her. Only NC phones and loud music could block her out. I have never hated a person more than this. Story 55. We hired a new engineer. He was a bigger guy, and anytime we ordered pizza for the office, he would impress upon me the absolute importance of him having ranch for his pizza. Gross, but also, he would disappear on 20-minute-long bathroom breaks. Clients would be calling for him, and I'd have to keep saying he was away from his desk but would be back shortly. It was annoying, but who wants to question someone's bathroom habits? Finally, like 4 months in, one of the other engineers caught him at his car in the parking garage, smoking. Dude was making the 8-minute walk to the parking garage, having a cig, then making the 8-minute walk back. He was the only smoker in the office. I guess he didn't want us to know. Story 56. Fresh out of college, my first job was in an MRSA lab, infectious skin disease. There was another biomedical engineer that was hired at the same time that was just dreadful to work with. She would constantly quip about how she was going to make more money than me because women are dominating the science fields and society is compensating blah blah blah. I didn't even know this girl, but every day it was some weirdly charged and often sexist opinion. The worst was that she would constantly pick at this scab on her arm in our MRSA lab. Lab coats did not help, and I would be shocked if she didn't give herself MRSA on the job while skipping over all sorts of basic personal protection. Story 57. Worked with a lady named Sally who made everyone uncomfortable. She was around 5'6" or so and well over 280, 300 pounds. She wore a literal dog collar and talked about her master all the time and how he made her wear it. We worked third shift in a call center, and one night she came in with a whip and sat there braiding it and tying knots in it. In one of the most foolish decisions I ever made in my young life, I asked her why she was doing this. She told me her master wanted her to put knots in it every so many inches because it hurt more. Yeah, I complained to management at that point. I can only deal with so much. Story 58. I used to work with the most obnoxious git ever. When Game of Thrones was at its peak, he would wait up and watch the first showing, 2 a.m. here, then come in and spoil it by telling everyone what happened. We used to have charity events like quizzes, and he would kick up a fuss and accuse it of being a fix if he didn't win the big prize. He overheard me mentioning to a colleague about a place I was looking to rent, easily findable by an unusual historical feature in its garden. He told me his brother lived nearby and kids hung out there doing substances, so I didn't go for it. Later found out he rented it instead. I ducking hated that guy. He stunk of cat food constantly as well. Story 59. Coca-Cola delivery dude. He was a chronic abuser. The local approach in the 1980s was to simply tell women who worked with him not to be alone. I worked a loading dock. Even not being alone with him, he was horrendous. Said evil crap. Caused me to suffer serious injuries. Story 60. We had a really smelly guy working in the spa. He refused to wear deodorant even though the treatment rooms get really warm with 3 sources of heat running, and he smelled like bad beau constantly. He also told everyone that his home had bed bugs, but was mad no one touched some food he brought in. And last but not least, he cared constantly about having to pay child support for his 4 kids with 4 different women that he hadn't bothered to visit in years. He was not anyone's favorite. Story 61. Former employee who started working his first week also started harassing female employees that same week. As a beloved supervisor at the time, many of my female coworkers kept telling me about these situations and how it has been happening to them on a weekly basis. I reported to my SM, who then reports it to our DM, who then practically ignored this employee for about 3 months before they finally got rid of them. For 3 months, this dude would touch the women inappropriately before he was terminated. Hated the entire situation because I had to constantly keep an eye on this perv during my shifts and make sure he stayed busy instead of interacting with other staff members. Everybody was very uncomfortable whenever he was there on shift. Story 62. Guy who was absolutely crap at his job put in a false grievance bullying case against us all just so he could make money in a settlement. It was all a load of C and either fabricated or twisted so much it was an out-and-out lie. Sadly, he made money off it because when our company said they were dismissing it all, he said he was going to sue us, which we calculated if it cost, say, $20K in legal fees just to defend ourselves, offer him $10K as a settlement, and save half the money we'd lose out on. He took it, obviously. We found out from a contact at the UK Workers' Dispute Union the guy was well known to them for pulling this stunt. Story 63. Guy on a night shift of plant operations made a makeshift bed on the floor under the control console. The operations manager came back to work late because of a problem in another area and visited all units while he was on site. Woke him up and put him back to work with a warning. Came back after making rounds and found him asleep under the console again. Guy was always doing things like this, putting off duties to everyone else, not showing up for shift relief on time. Union did not contest his firing, and everyone was glad to see him go. Story 64. Not me, but someone in my family had a coworker who he would invite to lunch with the other employees. When they would go, this lady, I'll call her Mia, never brought her wallet, so the other employees or my cousin would have to pay for her lunch. This happened at least 3 times. So after that, they stopped inviting Mia or would try to take a lunch break before hers because this woman had the audacity to invite herself. Plus, she never paid anyone back either. Sometimes she would be a no-call, no-show at work too, and my family member would always have to do her work. Story 65. Objectively worst. Someone at a former employer went nuts in a 7-Eleven with an axe and nearly lost a woman. They're in prison. UTF worst. A coworker. I was in the field with crap himself. Diarrhea. I saw it. It was awful. Made me angriest. A coworker asked if I could do him a solid on a Friday afternoon and complete a task that was assigned to him, as he had to leave work to care for a sick child. Of course, I was happy to cover for someone for that. He then walked up the hallway and told our boss I offered to take it on. Later that night, I saw a picture of him at the pub on Facebook. Story 66. I worked in a small office with high turnover. One of the new sales guys seemed okay, but I was showing him something one day and he was over my shoulder chewing gum. I don't know why, but I got up, walked to the bathroom, and had a small physical response/freak out to it. Not a typical response for me. A few weeks later, he didn't come in because he was in custody for making CP, and we found out he had been in prison before for similar stuff in another state. 2 other people didn't come in due to arrest, evading police, and 1 person drank a handle of vodka during lunch, passed out in the locked bathroom, and the fire dep had to get him out. Story 67. Probably the guy I got fired for fraud, but not before months of him commenting on my tits, choice of boyfriend, later husband, and critiquing my work. Then I discovered proof positive that he was undeniably fabricating inspection results for an aircraft component when an inspector accidentally transposed 2 numbers and approved it as within tolerance when the part was good, but the number he wrote was not. And the asshat copied the bad inspection dimension and also approved it when none of the parts on the line were measuring at that dimension. Did I mention that he made $2 an hour more than me because of the fact that I had those tits in the first place? Ugh, story 68. Caught a lunch thief in our employee break room. Came in to hang up my coat and saw him at the fridge pawing through everyone's lunch bag. Watched in amazement as he opened the bag I just put in there and helped himself to my can of Pepsi. Before he could open it, he noticed I was there and said, "Hey." I said, "Hey, name, is that your Pepsi?" He chuckled and said, "It's somebody's." I says, "You damn right it is. It's mine. I suggest you put it back where you got it or I'm gonna break your fingers and then talk to the manager." There were no lunch thefts after that. Story 69. I have a friend who is a supervisor of several people. Well, the person one of their supervisees supervises wasn't doing their job appropriately. Said person had to be spoken to several times. Never anything confrontational, but how can we help you learn and get better? Type crap. My friend was in on a couple of those conversations. Apparently, these were too much for that supervisee, and my friend got a restraining order filed against them by this person, all because this person didn't want to be told that they were doing their job poorly. Restraining order got thrown out by a judge who basically said it was a huge waste of time. Story 70. Had a coworker who started calling in sick every Monday and Friday. The excuses got more and more bizarre. Long story short, she was a party girl and an alcoholic. They tried to get her to go to rehab. She went maybe 3 times and announced she was cured. 2 weeks later, she was found with her head down on the desk, on the phone with a client, just mumbling nonsense into the microphone. She quit before she could get fired, and when they cleaned out her desk, found a full drawer of those little airline bottles of alcohol. She had been putting them in her water bottle and drinking at her desk. Employers of Reddit, what are your best idiot employees' stories? Story 1. I hired one guy. No doubt he's a bit special needs, but I can't push the issue. Laughs at nothing, prances around, usually harmless things. Occasionally, he'll have a bad day and accuse me of being a robot or something and have a genuine freakout. But he makes a mean patty and keeps me secret formula safe. Story 2. I witnessed this firsthand during my time in the Navy. All of us were hospital corpsmen, Navy for medical or nursing assistant, and trained in anatomy and physiology, among other medical aspects. So we had this girl named Karen. Karen was a special kind of stupid. Karine, my supervisor Rob, and a few other corpsmen worked in the recovery room, where surgical patients recover. Karine was the sort of employee who would sit next to you and ask the most pointless, out-of-left-field questions when you were busy and then didn't understand why you couldn't tell her the history of recovery rooms right this second, when we were busy getting a new patient set up, fresh out of surgery. Anyway, on this one day, we were really busy with lots of surgical patients coming through, and Rob decided to fix Karen for a bit. He was busy taking care of a patient, and Karen was busy being a ditz. So he made it sound like it was an urgent thing and told her that he needed to do a dressing change on a patient. But first he needed some eustachian tube. Note, eustachian tube is a body part that connects the ear to the throat. So far as I know, there's no such thing as artificial eustachian tube. Karen was the kind of ditz to ask how much eustachian tube he needed, and he guessed, about 10 feet. He told her to look in the supply closet, where of course it wasn't, and then to go over to the operating room and ask if they had some in stock. He expected her to come right back. I was sitting nearby watching him. Neither of us expected what happened. Karen went over to the operating room to ask if they had eustachian tube. Now normally the nurses over there would tell a person they were being pranked and to shut up and go back to work. But on this day, the nurse over there wasn't having her crap either, and told her they were fresh out and to go over to the ENT, ear, nose, and throat clinic, which was on the far side of the hospital from the OR. Down the hall, Karen went to the NT clinic. Again, the people at the NT clinic would have called her on the prank, but they were having none of it either. Not only did the ENT people tell her that they were out of eustachian tube, they gave her a fake part number and told her she would have to go to the supply center of the hospital, which was deep in the basement of the hospital. Admittedly, the supply people haven't had medical training, and so they didn't know that eustachian tube was a non-existent entity. So Karen went down there and waited patiently for them to find the part in their computer. Of course, they couldn't find it in the computer, so they had to resort to looking on the shelves, where it of course also was not. At some point, Karen was forced to admit defeat and returned back to Rob a couple of hours later, long after the original patient had returned to his or her room. Rob was amazed at the lengths that Karen went to, and the lengths that the hospital staff went to. He and I shared a good laugh about it, until our charge nurse got wind of it and gave him a good talking to. So far as I know, Karen never did figure out that eustachian tube is not found in any part catalog. Story 3. This just happened 2 days ago. I work at a fast food restaurant mainly as a fry cook, and because we have no dishwasher, it's my responsibility to wash the dishes. I had filled up the sink with beautiful turquoise soapy water and gotten through most of the dishes. I'm very particular about making sure the water is soapy enough and remains clean and blue until I'm done, and at the moment, all I had left were about 20 small bowls that were not visible underneath the water. One of my new coworkers, a 17-year-old boy, is back there with a broom washing his hands in the nearby hand-washing sink when I come over to finish up. He's telling me about how he just had to clean the bathrooms and there was crap everywhere on the floors. He shows me the tip of the broom handle and explains that somehow he had gotten crap on the tip of it. I ask him to please clean the top of the broom with bleach. He cheerfully explains that he was just using my dishwater and shows me by dipping the top of the crap-covered broom handle into the dishwater. Had I not walked by at that exact moment, I would have washed all of our dishes in crap. He thought it was okay because he couldn't see any dishes in there, although there were still dirty dishes off to the side, and he thought I was done washing for the day. I drained everything, cleaned out the sink, and washed those dishes more thoroughly than I think I've ever washed anything. He made me promise not to tell anyone, and I promised him that I'd kick his ass if I ever caught him doing something that stupid again. I just realized this was only for employers, but I'm getting promoted to be a supervisor soon, so here's hoping it's still relevant. Story 4. I was in charge of the prep for a high-volume, mostly outside seating, BBQ place. We had some foreign college students who were in a work exchange program where they lived on the property in little cabins that also got rented out to people vacationing in the area. So the one in question was a 21-year-old from Kosovo who had never held a job before. Different family dynamics there. And I go to teach him how to make corn muffins. Cornbread mix in huge boxes poured into muffin pans passed off as cornbread, baked fresh daily. Anyway, this involves a pretty simple dynamic here. 1. Take a box of cornbread mix. 2. Add 7 cups, incidentally the same measurement as those plastic bar pitchers, of water. Stir and deposit into buttered baking pan and pop into oven. Check on them every once in a while until they're done, because who knows what the duct temperature the oven decided to run at today. And repeat until another 500 or 600 people can have a damn corn muffin. Ask him if he knows where the supplies are. No. So I go around and show him. I get a large mixing bowl, a whisk, the muffin mix, a pitcher, pre-filled, with the correct amount of water to the top. Yes, this is important, unfortunately. A spoon to scoop the batter, liquid margarine, and muffin tin. I set them out on a clean counter, tell him to mix the batter, and get a seafood order called back, which I then would have to go to the outdoor freezer, grab a lobster and some clams, whip it up in the back, send it to the line, then get back to the other stuff I had to get done. So I leave, come back, drop the lobster clams down, into the pot, that is, and turn around. He is taking the spoon and completely oblivious to the whisking bowl large enough to accommodate 7 cups of water and 5 pounds of muffin mix in front of him, proceeds to dump spoonful after spoonful of mix into the already full pitcher, stopping every once in a while to mush the spoon down to the bottom and swirl it around awkwardly for a bit. I know it's not that remarkable, and I definitely have more, probably better, antic-filled stories than that one about this colorful location. However, this really stuck with me. I mean, seriously, who is that clueless, completely ignoring physics and forging his own way in the world? Story 5. I'll try to sum it up by first telling you about the folks I work with. First, there's this supermodel wannabe chick. Yeah, okay, she is pretty hot, but damn is she completely useless. The girl is constantly fixing her hair or putting on makeup. She is extremely self-centered and has never once considered the needs or wants of anyone but herself. She is as dumb as a box of rocks, and I still find it surprising that she has enough brain power to continue to breathe. The next chick is completely the opposite. She might even be one of the smartest people on the planet. Her career opportunities are endless, and yet she is here with us. She is a 0 on a scale of 1 to 10. I think she might be a lesbian because every time we drive by the hardware store, she moans like a cat in heat. But the jewel of the crowd has got to be the ducking stoner. And this guy is more than just your average pothead. In fact, he is baked before he comes to work, during work, and I'm sure after work. He probably hasn't been sober any time in the last 10 years, and he's only 22. He dresses like a beatnik throwback from the 1960s. And to make things worse, he brings his big ducking dog to work. Every ducking day, I have to look at this huge Great Dane walk around half stoned from the secondhand smoke. Hell, sometimes I even think it's trying to talk with its constant bellowing. Also, both of them are constantly hungry, requiring multiple stops to McDonald's and Burger King every single ducking day. Anyway, I drive these ducktards around in my van and we solve mysteries and crap. Story 6. I wasn't the employer, but I was a manger of a radio station news team. I went to work at about 7 in the morning, but this day I went in at about 5. Each department of the station had a set of offices. Our station wasn't in the best part of town, so each department had a door that locked it off using a keypad. This pretty much put the building into lockdown at night. The only unlocked portion was the DJ booth and one production booth, as well as the kitchen and a set of bathrooms. Each morning, the manager or assistant manager would type in the code and unlock the door for the day. At night, a different code was entered, locking each department. One morning, I had a news story that needed an interview cut, so I decided to go in an hour or so early. I typed in the door code, and there was a beep telling me the door was already unlocked. Confused, I walked into the news lobby and saw the coffee pot had already been turned on. I had 6 people on my news team, but only one other person was scheduled to come in, and they weren't due until evening. Plus, only I and the assistant manager and the station manager knew the door code. So I figured the station manager had needed something and came in and just left the door unlocked for me. I was so wrong. I went strolling into my office, ready to rip my audio files to the computer. It was easier to rip audio from my office than go to the recording booth for editing. I was met with one of my news reporters with his pants down, getting it at my computer, watching a woman being plowed by a donkey. That's right, the dude was watching a donkey show on his boss's computer. I wasn't sure how to write that one up. After the dude got fired, I got donkey show jokes for the next year. For those wondering how he got around the internet security settings, he used a proxy. Story 7. My delivery driver working drunk, wrecking into a ditch at a customer's house, then groping her when she came to help. I'll continue the rest of that story first. So after I fired him for that, time comes to get him his last paycheck. Can't get in touch with him. Turned out he'd went to fly back to his mother in Rhode Island or something and was drunk, naturally, on the plane. And when the flight attendant cut him off, he either shoved or smacked her, months after 9/11. His mother told me this when she called to tell me where to send the check to. The guy had a problem, obviously. When I was a manager at Subway, we'd had an ice storm, and a guy had left his car in the parking lot. It was frozen over when he came to get it the next day. Now I'm unsure of the events that led up to this, because I was busy, but somehow, one of my more idiotic employees wound up pouring near boiling hot water on the guy's windshield and shattering it, without permission from the car's owner. By far, though, the biggest idiot employee I had was on work release from the local prison. He had 6 weeks to go before parole, and just up and decides to cut and run with his girlfriend while on my shift. I'd actually heard them talking about it, and it didn't register what they were talking about until the realization hit me that he was gone, right as the prison driver guard showed up to pick him up. He knew the guy was gone the minute he walked in and saw the look on my face. Not fun for me. I suspect that he ran because he'd been getting substances from the girlfriend and was going to fail his substances test and not get paroled. Story 8. Her name was Leslie, by far the nicest girl I've ever met, but she was the definition of the ditzy blonde. This was at a movie theater, by the way. She had just given a guy change for $100 when he had actually given her $20. So my boss at the time was in her face just screaming at her, threatening to fire, and just other standard boss rants. Mid-rant, she gets this platinum smile across her face and starts jumping up and down while clapping and screaming, "Look, it's a butterfly!" As the butterfly fluttered past, my boss just turned around in defeat and shuffled back to the office. There are so many Leslie stories to tell, but so limited battery life on my phone. Story 9. Not a boss, but had this happen to a coworker. I worked at Moe's as a burrito Karen. One day they called everyone in for a mandatory meeting. Someone had drawn junks in Sharpie. Every single sign, walls, mops, mop buckets, computer, cash register, anything you can imagine. Ducking junks everywhere. Not the same ones either. Long, short, fat, skinny, every kind of junk. They asked if anyone knew about who did it and why. Obviously, nobody gave a crap about their jobs and didn't say anything. Then my manager says, "If nobody confesses, we will just have to check the camera tapes and fire whoever is responsible." A big Irish guy then slowly takes off his Moe's hat and shirt, puts them on the counter, and just walks out. Ducking awesome. One of the very few highlights of working there. Story 10. Had a runner at a law firm. Main jobs were filing in the courthouse, running discovery to other lawyers, making copies, getting the mail, etc. Who was pretty stupid for a 25-year-old. Normally, the job is given to college students, either because they want to be lawyers someday, or they benefit for the flexible schedule that's offered. At one point, he, no college degree, not even in college, asked how he could move up around here. And when asked to explain, he said he wanted to know when he would be promoted to lawyer and how long it took people to move up to that position from his. A year or two, he was serious. As a runner, his main job was to go run an errand, come right back. It was important that he do that because more things would accumulate at the office that needed to be filed, sent out. He was often gone for long periods of time, even though the courthouse was a few blocks away. One time he was gone so long that we called him, and he said he was hungry, so he was eating at Buffalo Wild Wing. He was sitting down and eating a full BW meal on the clock in the middle of the afternoon. He couldn't understand why he got fired. This was the son of some friend of the firm that got hired out of pity, I think. He didn't submit a real application or anything. Story 11. When I was younger, I worked as a painter for about 5 years. I was working with these older guys after I was painting for about 3 years, and they hired this kid who dropped out of school. One day we were working, taking some wallpaper off, and it was a real Karen to get off. It came off in tiny little strips. They told this kid we needed to steam the paper off and said he needed to go down to gas station and get a couple of 5-gallon buckets of steam. He grabbed a couple of buckets and started for his car. And one of the old guys started laughing and told him to wait a minute. I thought he was going to tell him it was a joke, but nope. He told him how to expect to keep the steam in with no lids. This clown finds a couple of lids and off he goes. We sat there and laughed our asses off at this guy until he comes back. He wasn't too mad. He took it all in stride, but he always questioned anything you ever asked him to get after that. Later, I was working for a renovation company and we were setting roof trusses, and there was a helper there, and one of the guys called down to him. He said, "These are going to be too hard to set like this, so I need you to get the sky hook out of the truck." The poor kid ran down to the truck and we watched him look all over that truck, looking for anything that might look like a skyhook. Finally, he looked up at us and saw us all laughing and realized he'd been had. I guess these guys weren't really idiots, but it was fun watching these guys get hazed into the construction business. Story 12. We have one woman who, at first glance, looks like an employee that most employers would kill their mothers for. She's very attractive, speaks English and Spanish fluently, will put in 45 hours when she's scheduled for 40 and won't even put in for overtime. When we're touring with clients, her site is almost always the first on the list, and she's won countless company awards for her work. Her biggest problem is her promiscuity. She doesn't shut up about it, and she has absolutely no shame. She discusses the numerous affairs she's had on her husband as openly as you or I would describe what we had for lunch, up to and including once posting pictures from a weekend in Maine with her husband's best friend on Facebook. No, they're not married anymore. After what seemed to be a race to see how much sex they could have without having it with each other, they finally got a divorce. We were once sitting around, myself, her manager, and a couple of coworkers. There was an article in the paper about a man who ended his life after finding out his wife was sleeping around. She comes out with a line I will never forget. And that's why I stopped sleeping with men my husband knows. She has been warned numerous times about inappropriate discussions in the workplace, but the company refuses to officially write her up for it. They consider her far too valuable as an employee. And if company policy were followed, they'd have been forced to fire her a long time ago. Upper management is just hoping nobody ever files an official complaint that forces them to take action. So far, they've been lucky. Story 13. Not an employer, but I was a camp counselor for a day camp. My group and one other group of slightly younger kids went off-site to a gym for a few hours a day, taking a camp bus there and back. There were 4 counselors, 2 for each group. Mine had 3, but one of my 2 co-counselors was off sick for the day. Anyway, I was the youngest of the bunch, but the most experienced counselor, and the 3 idiots managed to convince the bus driver to stop at a coffee shop. So I'm left on a bus with around 30 kids under age 12 who are tired, hungry, and upset. Didn't want to confront the other counselors because they could be pretty nasty to me and my ilco. So once we got the kids to camp, very late, I set them up for lunch, left them with the 3 others, and went and told the camp supervisor what had happened. Had no choice. The kids were going to tell their parents, and the camp would be getting calls that night. Honestly, this was mostly me saving my own butt. Anyway, the 2 nasty girls got fired, and the 1 other girl stayed around. My sick co came back the next day, found out what happened, and hugged me. We were both glad to see them go. Anyway, it was just a colossally stupid thing to do. Why they thought that was a good idea. Story 14. Had a guy I hired to do storefront installations at construction sites. One day he calls in sick, whatever, no worries. I get a call that afternoon from another employee at a job site to go to the site, says it's important. I head out there, luckily it's pretty close, and see my sick employee. He's working for another company at the new store next door, installing their storefront. Guy thought he could get paid by me and another company at the same time. Nope. Story 15. A rubber training rifle. That is a new rubber rifle. The one in my story was probably 20 years old and any details had long been worn off. I was prepping my gear, getting ready to go on a training exercise when my squad leader yells at Wells. This happened quite a bit. Wells had previously left his rifle sitting against a tree and had driven 20 minutes before realizing he had forgot it. He was no longer trusted with an actual rifle, so he carried a rubber stick that vaguely resembled one. Wells was being yelled at because his condition was different from the rest of ours. We had real rifles with no magazines inserted. He had a toy that resembled a rifle with a magazine inserted. Wells then attempted to take the magazine out of the solid chunk of rubber. He pulled with all his might, but it would not move, mainly because it was one solid chunk of rubber. I then see a aha expression cross his face. He rotates the rifle and presses the bulge that once resembled the magazine release. With a triumphant look, he then once again tugs on the magazine, expecting it to eject. It does not. He slumps over in defeat, and we all wonder how he has survived for 26 years on this planet without falling down a mine shaft or locking himself in his oven. Story 16. I had a guy who worked for me who was truly an idiot. He color-coded a document and then made copies for everyone on a BW printer. He could not understand why we couldn't follow along. I heard another story from a fellow manager. He needed to meet with the employee to review a lengthy document, but got stopped on the way to the meeting. He told the guy, just go on to the conference room and spread out. I'll be there in a minute. When he got to the conference room, a large room typically used for presentations, there was a sheet of paper in front of every chair in the room, roughly 50 chairs. He said, "What the hell are you doing?" The employee replied, "You told me to spread out." Story 17. I've gotten to training some folks at the airport, so I've seen some winners. Among my favorites, red is unleaded, green is for diesel, yellow is hydro. Don't mix them up. Okay, so this is a diesel belt loader, right? Yes, I reply. The fill cap's in the middle there, right behind the hydro. What's he do? Gets halfway done unscrewing the hydro cap, engine running and all. Don't drink the glycol. Same kid, few weeks later during a winter event. Tactile checks are last checks before continuing aircraft de-icing. It's the visual inspection we do to make sure your plane doesn't have any ice or other frost or whatever on the wing. Kids in the bucket, singing away, trying to out loud the Apu. Hey burrito, is that a spot right there? He points, looking down toward me. I look over and sure enough, his entire leading edge was still covered in ice. He may not be our star employee, but at least he's learned what is that stream of, oh, why is it hot? I had about 3 seconds between his pointing out the icy wing portion before he blasted it, disregarding me standing right there. Not a care in the world. Story 18. She gave a customer $800 in change for a $100 bill. At the corporate office with HR fanatics, they hired a guy that hit on every woman in the office. He started with the attractive ones and eventually worked his way to everyone. His follow-up to the married ones was to ask if it was a happy marriage. After his first lap around the dating pool, he zeroed in a couple and tried to wear them down with flowers and insistence he could make them happy. I think the hard sell on the lesbian was what finally got him the axe. Story 19. Preface. The employee this is about graduated high school and attended several college classes. Our hotel runs an airport shuttle in a mid-sized city. A guest emailed that he wanted a shuttle from the airport to the hotel when he arrived on a particular day at noon. I forwarded the email to a front desk agent and asked her to schedule the shuttle ride. She came into my office and asked what time she should schedule it for. I asked if she read the email and she said she did, but did not know when to send the shuttle. I said, well, his email says his flight arrives at noon. Let's get there 15 minutes later, just like always, to give him to get outside. She said, but what time should I schedule it for? I said, his flight arrives at noon. She said, I know, but what time should I schedule it for? I said, 15. She said, but how do we know what time he will be here? I said, his flight arrives at noon. He told us in his email. She said, I know, but noon is any time between 12 unquark and 2. Again, high school graduate. Way to go, teachers. Story 20. I used to work in a test lab at a major computer manufacturer. There was a bank of computers used for some sort of automation that sat across the room from us. The lab manager set up a webcam that was motion activated to keep an eye on the computers because parts had come up missing. One day, the guy that sat next to me got fired. I asked around, and it turns out he walked over to the webcam, looked at it, which caused it to start recording, and followed the USB cable down and unplugged it and put it in his backpack. Well, the lab manager thought that it was odd to see this guy's face, then the camera go black. So he came into the lab and saw that the camera was missing. It was found in the guy's backpack, and he was fired from an $80,000 a year job for a $20 webcam. I'll bet that was a fun conversation with his wife. Story 21. Someone told this new kid that the two brooms were a left-handed broom and a right-handed broom. Last week, he asked me, is this a left-handed broom? It feels funny. So I handed him the other one and he goes, oh yeah, much better. Story 22. I run a food distribution warehouse. In a few areas, we use high-rise stock pickers. These are lifts that have forks, but the entire operator platform goes from floor to ceiling with the forks, and the operator hand stacks product from the pallet to the racking. Because these machines operate in close proximity to the racking, we have guide rails on the floor to prevent them from running into the racks. Every once in a while, the anchors that hold the rails pull out, fail, and we have to drill new holes in the rails and floor and re-anchor them. I've got a kid that's in college and works part-time for me. Awesome worker, but completely useless when it comes to tools and mechanical things. Got him set up with the drill, safety glasses, and cutting fluid, and he went to town for 20 minutes before coming back to report to me that all of our drill bits were junk. Considering they were brand new bits and not cheap, I was a little surprised. I went down back to see what he was up to and found that he'd been drilling with the drill in reverse the whole time. Story 23. I'm not an employer or a supervisor, but an employee. I'm a dishwasher in a pretty busy kitchen. Sadly, I wasn't here during this as I had given away the shift, but one of my kitchen supervisors came in well less than sober. He was pretty ducked up. From what I was told, he came into work and wandered aimlessly for a solid hour around the kitchen. He then stood in our walk-in fridge for a bit. After all this, he went into our dish pit and tried to fight my buddy. Let's call him Pal, was covering for me. He's another kitchen guy. He had the day off and didn't mind doing dishes. Anyways, after my high as a kite supervisor tries to fight him for who gets to do the dishes, he walked out into the middle of our kitchen and passes out on the floor. He was then dragged outside, and my manager woke him up and flat out said, "You're fired, go the duck home." Story 24. I've told several stories about my time driving a cab, but this one happened on my first day before I even drove a block. I get there 4 a.m., and the dispatcher is on the phone with a client. The client is mad, so mad, I can hear both sides of the conversation easily. He's that loud. It seems a couple of days ago, He has us take a package to the Twin Cities airport, should have cost about $300. The driver, however, had a brain fart and took it to the Chicago airport instead. Once there, the driver then and only then checks his paperwork and realizes it was supposed to go to Minnesota, not Illinois. He doesn't tell anyone, just heads back and takes the package to the right airport, but of course by now the plane it was supposed to be on has long ago left. He leaves the package there anyway. Okay, here's the kicker. He left the meter on the entire time, including the over $1,000 side trip, and charged the client for the whole amount. He was called in later that day and fired, and he didn't get a cent for that fare. Story 25, I work as a lifeguard, and the pool has 3 sections which are joined. The main swim pool, which is rectangular and for lanes. A medium-sized kids pool, which is only about a meter deep, and a tiny baby pool, which is about a foot deep and has holes in the floor where bubbles come out for the kids to play in. They are all joined and linked, and the water flows between them all. A few other lifeguards convinced another employee lifeguard that the bubble machine part of a baby pool was where the chlorine got entered into the whole pool system, and that the chlorine was a bit low in the main adult bit of the pool. So he got a bucket and spent a good half an hour taking buckets of water from the baby pool and chucking it in the main pool. Story 26. One time I told a receptionist to water the flowers in the lobby. I watched him walk up to a clearly fake tree, the type of fake tree that is in every office setting, and dump a liter of water into the base. He didn't even continue on to water the real plants. Poor simple boy came back to me smiling. Story 27. I was once a teller supervisor at IBC Bank and had a trainee ask, "What's that small gray box?" To which I reply, "The thermostat," which was next to me at the time when I was walking into the vault room. I walk in and notice the alarm light going off. I come back out to see if everything was okay, and my coworkers are looking at me like I'm crazy. Then it hits me. This idiot pressed the hold up silent alarm button, and that's not even the worst part. I call the alarm company to cancel the alarm, but due to policy, they can't. Police have to be called. So 2 hours later, one cop walks in, and I crap you not, leans back and says, "Y'all good? All right," and then walks out. SAPD. And then this dumbest trainee got caught stealing from the Heb grocery store we were located in. Since it was over 20, he was arrested. Not the brightest one, I tell you. Story 28. Not an employer, but I've worked with my fair share of idiots. A few of my favorites. A guy who was cleaning under a shelving unit and went to stand up whilst his arm was still under it, dislocating it. He tried to sue us. Another guy asked why we were all off on the 25th of December. Later, we asked him when Christmas is. He thought about it long and hard and answered, "I'll worry about it when it gets nearer." He's a father. His sister got pregnant by a homeless guy. A girl who had recently got a degree spent 5 minutes in trying to open the wrong end of a bin bag. Instead of turning it the other way, she came to me and asked if it was even a bin bag in the first place. Got a guy with the old ask for a long wait trick. He was gone for 10 minutes because the departmental manager cottoned on and left him there. Story 29. I was a loadmaster on C-17 cargo aircraft in the USAF. I supervised loading offloading of cargo. One day we were picking up pallets of some kind of bomb or other in an unnamed location. This location did not have standard material handling equipment, so the pallets were being brought out one by a forklift. The bombs are organized vertically in rows onto a wooden base with a net around them, which fits on top of the standard metal pallet we can load in the jet. This time the wooden base which held the bombs in place was broken in the corner, causing several bombs to lay lopsided and stick out of the cargo net. As this forklift pulls up to the jet, I'm like, seriously? Forklift guy, a Marine, just shrugs at me, facepalm. I imagine a bunch of bombs flying all over the jet when we hit turbulence, and told him that no, we are not taking that, at no exceptions. Story 30. One of our employees likes to come into work and then call out sick from the break room if there's too much work to do. He's on FMLA, so there's not a lot that can be done. My wife worked as an auditor for a bank. She always had other duties as assigned. One day she was visiting the security department and found out that 2 branch employees, manager and assisted, were screwing like rabbits all over the branch after hours. This was done with the knowledge that there are a lot of cameras in the bank that, actually work. There was also something about the employees playing poker for money after hours. After they fired the manager and assistant, the wife had to audit the branch. She said she wanted to wear a biohazard suit so she didn't come in contact with anything. Story 31. A collections agent took a payment on an account under her ID from a customer many states away, then ordered pizza to our call center under her name charged to the customer's card. An applicant was not allowed to go into the secure area of the office in order to use the restroom. We told her we would hold her application while she ran next door to 7-Eleven. Instead, she just walked outside into the bushes, lifted her skirt, and gave a whole department of 100 people a view of her goods while she peed down the one-way glass window. A couple who were in different departments missed each other so much during the day that they used a customer account to note sexts back and forth to each other. Notes appeared on customers' bill. How do these people think they'll get away with this crap?